Hello friends, I am using the same macros as my last deficit. Why am I so much hungrier now? Another question I've gotten is, nothing is working in my 40s and 50s. Do I just need to accept that this is it and I should just settle? And lastly, how does double progression work in a progressive overload training program? I'm covering the answers to all of these in this week's episode so you can keep making progress to look like you lift. Let's get into it. And first, I'm always trying to find ways so you can kind of wrap your head around the strategy, the framework, how it works, and what you're missing to be able to look like you lift. And so I have put together a class, how to look like you lift, be fit, and well fueled. So the class is, I've added it to the link in the show notes, so you can watch that to really understand the framework, the strategy, and really wrap your head around all of it. So go ahead and get that in the show notes now. Now, let's get into these questions that I received from various people, some from clients, some from people I'm just chatting out in the world with, and some of them that you guys have submitted to me, but I feel like they're probably all questions you've had before or could use a better understanding of. So the first one, I'm using the same macros as at the end of my last deficit. Why am I starving? Now, this is a client that I had previously worked with, and then she was doing a deficit in my alumni program in determining her own macros. So that's to kind of give you an idea there. And so I'm very familiar with the strategy that we had used and what we have updated. And so she thought, oh, I need to be eating more voluminous food. But actually, she was just solving the wrong problem and didn't realize the strategy had changed and there's more nuance to it. So my answer is, we intentionally increased her metabolism between her last deficit and this deficit. So cutting at the same targets would put her at a much more aggressive cut, much more lower calories, kind of not absolute wise, but in context of the situation. And that would make her hungrier. However, she should either be seeing a much greater rate of fat loss, but at what point does that not make sense for her scenario and her situation? If we've increased her metabolism, there are a handful of different methods that we implemented over the past 2 months so that she could cut at a higher intake, then does it make sense to go that low? Because if she's starving, the issue with that is it's going to be much harder to be consistent and stick with it. But also that's when it may start impacting her training, which she was already noting before that, saying, hey, I might have to reduce training capacity and intensity. And if her cut is really aggressive and she's decreasing fast, she could also be pulling from muscle. So it's more nuanced than just okay, cut, use the same macros all the time, especially if we're intentionally working to increase your metabolism. So that is the answer to the question that she was asking, why am I starving? But the whole point of it is your metabolism is adaptive, and that's a good thing because we want to implement tools to make it adaptive, to make it better, to make going into the deficit easier and more intentional and more of a way that supports sustainability, being well fueled in muscle mass. So that is the answer to that. And that may make you think oh, okay, I don't just use the same macros again and again and again. Next question. Do I need to just settle at 40, 50 years old? Is this just my shape and I just should accept it? Everybody I know, my family kind of looks like this. Is that it? So the answer to that is, well, first let me explain this scenario. I have talked with a handful of ladies, and a lot of them lately are I want to look in the best shape for my 40th. Or they're I think I'm in perimenopause, and nothing's kind of working. I've done some various programs or nutrition protocols. Nothing seems to work. And they just feel frustrated, almost defeated. Do I just give up? Is this just it? And the answer is absolutely not. I've seen many, and if you saw my stories lately, you'd see this, many ladies in their 50s, in their 60s, in the best shape they've ever been in. And they're like, oh, I look way better now than I did in my 20s. So how are they achieving this? I have to say the principles stay the same of building muscle and decreasing body fat at any age. The principles stay the same, especially for the ladies that I work with. But you do have to consider within that system, within those principles, you do have to consider what's changed. Likely metabolism, potentially muscle mass, and hormones. So it's kind of like making an old house look clean. I think newer houses, they're way easier to look clean, right? However, whether it's an old house or a new house, you're still doing the same exact things to get a clean house. You're still mopping, vacuuming, you're still wiping down, like spraying and wiping down everything. Like the actual cleaning doesn't change. And it's not like, oh, it's an old house, it's just never going to be clean again. No, you still do the same things. However, within that, the nuance is different. With an older house, you might have to use a special kind of material in order to like get a longer term stain out. You might have to like cover something up to make the house look clean, where a spot that is just not going to like change or needs support. It's like nuance, right, of what you would do. However, the same principles are the same. Same thing with building your shape at when you're in 40s, 50s, and beyond. So here are the three things that come into play at this age. The first that I see is it's just more nuanced than you think it is. So generally, for generic weight loss, when you have a decent amount of weight to lose, you have 40, 50, 60 plus pounds to lose, you can get away with this very like basic things of like just eat healthy, right? Work out, eat healthy, right? But at your level where you're like, no, like I'm healthy, I want to look fit, that is not going to work. Like you have to be more specific, more fine-tuned than that. So it is more nuanced in your nutrition. This is where like macros and custom macros come into play. It's more about the quantity. It's more about, okay, first we want to have higher set of macros, then go into a lower set of macros at certain timing. Like it is that nuance. The same with your training. It's not just like, okay, yeah, I lift weights, check the box. I do upper body and lower body, check the box. It's like, well, are we executing that in a way that's actually creating a stimulus for that muscle to grow? And then are we fueling it with the materials after that? And then do we have the training program set up so we are building muscle, right? In the spots that we want to build muscle. So again, more nuance than we think. The second part of that is you should be making progress every week. And so there are a lot of programs out there that it's just like, here is a generic like nutrition or fitness protocol that when you do it, the whole goal is just to feel better, right? And when I say feel better, meaning like be consistent and like, oh, I got my workout in today. And that's great, right? Many people need that. You do not need that, right? You need more nuance. But then in addition to that, you should be making progress every week. So we need measurable things that show us that and the right things to measure, that we're making progress every week. And then if not, there needs to be adjustments in questioning and coaching happening. So I have a handful of things that I measure in my check-ins with my ladies to ensure we're making progress. And if not, we're going to coach on it, right? We're going to dig in. We're going to make adjustments because I am just not a coach or like a program where it's like, this is just so you like feel good. It's like, no. You came to have specific changes in your physique. Here's the roadmap to get there, specific to you. Here's how we're making like progress each week, the project management side of it, to ensure we're doing that, like we're achieving it, right? So that's the second thing. The third thing is blood work. So I do have my ladies get a comprehensive blood work panel. And I think people are confused on what that means. They just think like, oh, I get this done and my doctor told me I look fine. Or I get this done and now I know that, bananas don't really agree with me. No, I'm not talking about that. Those are allergy tests. Those are like general, like healthy visits with your doctor. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about getting a full panel to really see how all of your organs are functioning. Like if you looked under the hood, how are all of your organs functioning? So that way your body is set up to be able to build muscle and decrease body fat in the most optimal way. Of course, then it also ties into your daily energy levels, which will tie into the previous too. And your vitality, your overall health. Of course, it ties into all of that, and that's also why I do it. But it is a factor, especially at these ages, where that is going to determine how much faster you can build muscle or decrease body fat. So that is the next thing. I mean, I want to look at hormones, I want to look at vitamin D, I want to look at thyroid, like all these things, right? And so I can't emphasize this enough. I work with a lot of ladies, generally late 30s, 40s, 50s. I just put up a great example of someone in their 60s that created an incredible shape in just one round. And now she's like, oh my gosh, this is great. I want to keep going. So now she's doing another round too. But my point is yes, I see it time and time again. You do not have to settle. You are not a special snowflake. It is just science, how it works. But it generally is more nuanced than you think. And we want to look at these other factors that I've mentioned and measure progress and make adjustments and get blood work done, all of that. Now, let's get into the last question. How does double progression in a progressive overload training program work? Okay, so I have a client who is on my training program, and she had this question because my program is set up to be double progression. And I actually have this in like an FAQ part that she didn't see, but regardless, I think it was good for me to like just break it down and explain it, because it is something totally different that it helps to hear if you walk through it. So I'm going to walk through it now. A double progression generally means when you get your program, it says, all right, do leg extensions for 8 to 12 reps. And you might be like, well, okay, well, is it 12 or is it 8 or do I do 10, right? And so that's the difference between a more like intermediate program, like beginner intermediate program is going to say do 3 sets of 10, right? Where to get more out of it, you would do double progression. Because if you just did 3 sets of 10, right, the main part where you are going to stimulate muscle growth is in those last 5 reps to failure. So if I do 10, I pick a weight, I do 10, but I could have gotten 12 and I just stop at 10, I'm missing out on those 2 reps. That's going to be a huge difference in my progress, especially if I'm doing that every set, every exercise, every day for weeks on end, right? That's a ton of progress I'm missing out on. So the double progression allows you to say, okay, I'm going to pick a weight and I'm going to do as many as I can. Ideally, I pick the weight where I can do around 8 to 12. And so if I pick a weight and I'm correct, right, and that takes a little bit of practice, that's called weight selection. That's a whole different episode. If I pick the weight, I'm correct. All right, maybe I get 10, where I can't do any more after 10. Let's say I'm doing leg extensions, right? I get 10, I try to do 11 and I fail it. Okay, great. Now I know next week, and I'm tracking this. So let's say I did 100 pounds for 10. Now I know next week I need to use that same weight and I need to get 11, right? That means if I get 11, that means I have progressed and I am building muscle. So next week I go in and I get 11. Great. Now next week I need to get 12. I go in, same weight, it's 100 pounds, I get 12. Great. Now I'm at the end of that rep scheme. So I've gotten 12. So now I know next week I need to increase the weight. Same thing, I'm going to increase the weight. So generally I'm not going to get probably 12 because I've increased the weight. So I might get 8 or maybe 9 or maybe 10, right? But I'm going to increase the weight and I'm going to go for at least 8. Okay, great. I got 9. Amazing. So next week after that, I'm going to try to get at least 10. Oh, it's a strong week. I actually got 11. So last week I got 8. This week I got 11. All right, next week I get 12. After I get 12, okay, I'm going to increase the weight again, right? This is how I know that I am ensuring progress every single week. It is also makes training so much more fun because it's like I'm competing every single time. But it's the double progression means I'm increasing in reps, but I'm also increasing in weight. But it has very like intentional guidelines and guardrails around it, so it's still in my sweet spot of hypertrophy, meaning building muscle. You have to track your weights, obviously, to do this. And the key factor of all this, you have to be going to failure on basically every exercise, maybe not for a few, but on basically every exercise. Because then if not, it doesn't make sense. And why would you not want to go to failure when the last 5 reps is where you're getting the most bang for your buck? All right, so again, just going to give you an example. If you have an exercise that is shoulder press, all right, maybe you do 20 pounds for 10 and the rep scheme's 8 to 12. All right, well, next week you're going to do how much weight? 20 pounds. What rep do you need to get to ensure you're progressing? 11. There you go. Now, every single week might not be a progression. You might have I didn't hit it. I got the same as last week. That's okay. That might happen. But the goal is to progress. All right. That is the final question. How does double progression work in a progressive overload training program? If you have any questions on any of these, I would love to hear from you. Just either email me or send me a DM if anything needs to get clarified. These episodes are for you, and I want you be able to take this and actually implement it. And it allows me to guide the content I put out in the podcast episodes I put out to make them even more helpful. So I would love to hear from you if you do have questions on this. And I do want to give you a heads up that the next Create Your Shape class is going to start at the end of September. So you'll be hearing more. This one is going to look a little different. So you can get excited about that. So you're going to be hearing a lot more about that, but you can mark your calendar, kind of get ready for it, because enrollment is going to start happening soon and more details to come. And I'll see you next week on the Create Your Shape podcast.